There we go. Let's straighten it out just a little bit, kind of like that. And we could maybe come just a little bit off the top here. Okay, so lift the shadows, should lighten up the bird, drop the blacks for contrast. I'm just going to do a global saturation punch there, just a little bit, like 10 points on that. And then let's do a quick subject select. I think it should give me the bird. I'm going to warm him up separately from the background. There we go. Warm that up. I'm then going to do another subject select. I want to get that head isolated a little bit more. I'm going to intersect that with a radial. Put it right around the head there. Let's zoom in on this and watch what happens here. So we just lighten. Slightly more warmth, slightly more magenta. Lift the shadows, drop the blacks. There's the bird's head now getting lit much nicer. I went too far in hindsight, so I'll just back off that exposure. Globally, we're going to add another linear. I want to make this bottom section a little bit more blue right in there. I'll subtract a linear from that to kind of fade out right there. And then we'll subtract the subject out of that as well. So we're left with that central band there. I'm just going to push that towards the cooler a little bit. We'll throw yet another linear in here. This is going to go a little bit more magenta for that top half. And then one more linear on the absolute top portion there to warm up that section because it kind of had that going for it there. So there we go. There's that one edited. So let's go into Photoshop, see if there's a little bit of tweaking, maybe just some added contrast and such, things like that to the bird. Maybe a little burn at the bottom here. So let's try that. We'll just go over here, grab a curves adjustment layer, kind of deepen that up there. Actually kind of like what the color did in some of those areas with that darker burn there. So maybe we'll apply some of that just to this upper portion, just kind of richen up some of those a little bit, but we don't want to go crazy here. It's really tempting to me too, a lot of the times, like, you know, you see it's like, oh, I got all these great colors, and listen, this is already enhanced, right? But then I do that and see that back there, and it's like, oh, that looks even better. It's more rich, crazy, awesome colors. But then I have to remember, like, this was the original out of camera, right? So you can see, yes, there's blue to kind of purpley pink to kind of orange fade there. It did exist, but that is already a decent enhancement. And then here I just went even further. And that being the case, actually, when I just walk through it like that, I'm just going to back off of some of that darkening up top a little bit more. So I'm just going to come across softly, paint with black, and kind of let that go a little bit more towards the original color. So that way I mostly get that burn on that bottom half and a little bit of richness in there. Because I really just don't want to misrepresent this scene for the viewer. That's my intention there. So in any case, I think let's go a little bit brighter, a little bit added contrast here on this bird. We'll just paint it in real soft, nice soft brush, low opacity. Just kind of paint that in there. Get a little bit on this part of the bird, just make that stand out a little bit more. And then I'm noticing, I feel like there's somewhat of a lack of that sort of buffy orangey color on the bird's face. So I think I'm just going to do another curves adjustment layer. Sorry, I was doing shortcuts there. Let's go ahead and actually show you how I do that. Click down here, curves, go to the red channel, click about there, move it up to the left a little bit. Once I click a point on, I just usually use the arrow keys to move it around. And then I'm just going to invert that mask so it's not affecting anything. And I'll just paint some of that in down here on the bird's head. And I'm actually going to paint some of that in on this bird's bill here just to exaggerate that pink ever so slightly. And then lastly, we'll just go ahead, and do a curves adjustment layer, punch up that catch light, just get that showing a little bit more in there. And there we go. That's my final image. So we just went from there to there. And that is an improvement. Very subtle, nothing too crazy. Nice, easy edit. We'll go ahead and save that and close it and get back into Lightroom. As soon as that finishes saving for me, we'll be able to see the before and after. And I am going to show you the complete before and after. I'll reset that image, the raw file in Lightroom here. So let's go ahead and reset that. And we can look at these side by side just to make sure we didn't go too crazy. And I don't think we did, you know. It's definitely like an increased amount of color there. But you can see the whole scene was just kind of lacking color. These birds do have a nice, more vibrant color to them. And so making it kind of stand out like that is all within reason to me. So there we go. That's going to be the edit. And we're done with that one. On to this next one. Here we go. Let's straighten this thing out. Follow that horizon there. There we go. So this one's tricky. I'm going to drop... I want to silhouette the bird because I don't see enough detail there, and it doesn't look right to me to lift the shadows all the way and try and show the detail on the bird. It's just too backlit in the original, so I feel like I'd be pushing too far. But I don't like this dark water behind it. So I believe what I'm going to do here is, let's try a gradient on the bottom half there, subtract the subject from that. I think it should do a decent job. I'm going to add the brush to fill in these areas it didn't do a decent job on, because it did not do perfect there, that's for sure. Not that it needs to be absolutely perfect for what I'm about to do, but I would like a little bit more improvement on what it did there. Let's get rid of that feather. Oops, went the wrong way. Meant to go that way. There we go. And we'll just get up in there around the neck. Oops. Larger brush there, just using the keyboard shortcut for that. And then we'll paint in the rest of this. And should be good to go. And again, like I said, it does not have to be absolutely perfect here, but definitely want to improve it a little bit more. And we'll lift that up, get all of that, zoom back in. I'll feather that brush up a little bit more. And then get up in here behind the legs and all. I'm not going to worry about in between the legs. That's not a big deal. That one went too far, so I just undid it. And there we go. Okay. All right. I think that should be good enough. And here's what I'm going to actually do. I'm going to negative dehaze that. I'll shift it blue to keep the cool color there. Those cooler tones. But I'm just going to keep dehazing to try and fade out that water like that. And then we'll darken it slightly. Actually, we're going to leave it lighter. And that may be a bit too much on the dehaze, so we'll bring some back. Then it's too cool. So something like that. So watch, especially that dark band right behind the bird. See how it really minimizes that and helps make our bird stand out more. That is what I was looking to do, just kind of soften and lighten up that water. And if I do edit this, I might do more in Photoshop with that. Then on this top half, I want to go the other way. I actually want to increase dehaze to kind of exaggerate those clouds a little bit there. And we'll make sure it's a nice soft fade there. And it also added some color. I'm going to throw one more on to just darken the bottom foreground there. And we'll throw that a little bit more blue. And then we're good to go. So watch my masking on this from that to that. See how much more that bird stands out? Before, after. I still think I may want to lean into like a full silhouette on this thing. So what my masking does that. Oh yeah, flatten that out. That's right. Which is all good. But it also feels like the whole bottom here could go. I did a good bit, but I feel like we could go even more into that blue with that. So let's try that. And like I said, I don't think I want to lift that up anymore. So if anything, I'm just going to drop it down. But then that makes my waves a little bit more detailed. So yeah, let's go into Photoshop. We'll just do it selectively. And I'm just going to make this bird a complete silhouette in that scene, which I think will actually make it stand out even more. So curves adjustment layer, we're just going to put a point right down here and just darken it up. Actually, I'm going to delete that point. Let's darken the black point here and see how fast that gets it black. That's even better. We'll invert that. Let's try a quick object select here. Let's see how it does. Oops, wrong tool. There we go. And then we'll wait for this to finish. I'm sure it's going to select that just fine. There we go. We'll click there. And let's just go ahead and fill that with white. I mean, that's pretty much the selection I wanted right there. It looks like it's slightly off. I don't know. What is that? A sense of Yeah, there's like a little bit of a weird blur there. Did that come from my edit? It did. All right. So what did that? That did it. And so this was, let's see, was it the subject select? It sure was. All right, so that subject select messed that up. So let's see how easy I can just clean that up here in Photoshop. But see, these are the kinds of things you got to watch for. It's these little details that just get kind of caught up in a subject select, and then it's like, oh, everything's fine. But look at that. My brushing out wasn't perfect back there. So you know what? I'm actually gonna go ahead, and redo this. Let's fix this in Photoshop or in Lightroom here. So I did the brush. The brush was adding right there, and that's where my line came from. Okay, so we'll go back to that. Smaller brush, lack of feather, flow to the max. Let's clean this up all the way, right around there, and make it a little bit more accurate to the bill of the bird there. There we go. All right. Something like that. And then we just got to fix there. Let's go even smaller. With the brush here. Got to take notice of it back here as well. Yeah, see, it's just a lot of areas that did not do great, and I didn't notice it because I was zoomed out too far, and I was just like, yeah, everything's fine on this. So now I do want some feather into it. We'll go a little bit smaller here, softer brush, and then we'll just kind of go up into these feather areas like that and just kind of sort of clean that up. And that's looking pretty darn good. Little fix right there. Obviously need to make a little fix right there. And now we're good. Okay, looking nice and clean. Let's zoom out on that just a little bit more. We're done. So watch this. This will be an easy fix. I'm just going to edit in Photoshop again. And I already have that mask sitting on the other version there. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this over to there. Delete that. Move this layer and just merge it down beneath. And now when I zoom in, I got a nice clean subject without any of that weirdness from before. All right, so let's continue on. We got our nice black subject now, so we went from there to there. Not much else to do. I'm going to do a little bit more enhancing here. Let's go a little bit darker with the clouds, something like that. Nice big soft brush, low opacity. Just paint some of that in there, some of that in there. It's like a little bit of cloud there, a little bit of cloud there. I'm just trying to kind of enhance how they look back there, something like that. And let's also go to the blue channel, add a little bit, lift that up something like that. I think works quite nicely. And I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else I want to do to this one. So from there to there, just minor edits. I love the colors that are going on back there. Making those clouds stand out a little bit more, I think, is a nice touch. To me, they were kind of an important element to it. And so we'll go ahead and save and close that. And we don't really need to look at it before and after on this. Nothing too major. It was pretty close to the original. So we should be good to go. This one's cool. I really dig this one. So I'm going to adjust for the main bottom half of the photo. So a little bit lighter, little shadow lift, and then drop these blacks, keep that contrast. I'm going to throw a linear gradient in on the bottom half here and cool it off to make it look more like water. I'm going to throw a radial in around the bird there to exaggerate and pop those highlights a little bit. So see from there to there, and maybe a little lift on the exposure. There we go. Then gonna add another linear on the top half here, and this we're gonna take darker exposure wise and then drop the highlights on it. And then maybe another radial. Let's see if I can just tone down this whole section. Feather to the max. Drop that exposure a little bit. What I'm looking to do mainly is I'd love to try and get this spot to be actually brighter than that spot. I don't think I can do it and make it look realistic, but That's much better, whereas this was way brighter than that before. This is really where I want the attention to go. There's really not much of anything else to do here. I maybe want to just do a little bit more blue tinting to that, maybe. Or maybe just tone down the yellow up there a little, but I kind of like the glow. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel like I need to change much of anything on this. We can make this area a little bit lighter behind it, so that might be a good move. So let's try that. Go ahead and put a curve on it. Lighten it up just a little bit there. Invert that. Real nice and soft, just painting in just to try and extend that brightest area out a little bit so it's kind of around the bill more there. So something like that. That's not bad. And then let's do another curve. Let's get a little bit more color in that bottom. So we're just going to go to the blue channel. It's kind of mid-tone to dark down there. So I'll put a point in there, move it up to the left. And then I do want to keep it a little bit cyan. So I'll put a point in the right channel, move that down to the right. Let's invert that. And then we'll just kind of paint that in across the bottom here. Something like that. Yeah, pretty basic, but it gives me just that nice little blue tone down there. I'm just going to scan the image. Yeah, it looks like there's like a bit of a smudge there. So my blank retouch layer there, clone tool, nice soft opacity. Just kind of paint that in from there. And then as I pan around, I'm not really seeing anything there. That's looking good. All right, there we go. I think that's it. That's a pretty easy edit. So from there to there, minor changes. Don't really need to show a total before and after on that, but I'm really happy with how this came out. And this was definitely more about getting it just right when I shot it in camera. All right, this is neat. I do like this one. I'm just going to crop off the bottom. We're not seeing it anyway there. So something like that. A little bit more black space up there. Let's see what else we have in this image. So yeah, we'll lift the exposure a little bit, drop the highlights a touch, shadows up, blacks back down, radial gradient around this brighter spot up top here, and drop those highlights even more, dim it down, make this the brightest spot in the image so the bird really stands out. All right, here's another one that I don't think there's a lot more to do in Photoshop to this. In fact, it's going to be real minimal. Maybe just some dodging and burning to kind of really help keep our attention in the right area. I'm just going to go ahead and start with a curve, punch it up just a little bit, invert that. I want to make these spots around the head a bit brighter here. So I'll paint some of that in there. Basically, it's just trying to exaggerate this silhouette, you know. Would have been nice if that went a little bit higher there so I had a little bit more space, but you know, hey, can't get everything perfect. I would like a little bit more around the tail end of this bird just to kind of get that to stand out more. Maybe now some of these spots can start to get darker, so we'll just do a curve, kind of push that down the opposite direction, and then maybe paint in some of that around this one. Basically just any of these brighter spots and areas that might sort of pull my attention away. I already did this one pretty good in Lightroom, but I'll just tap it a little bit more. And then I got to say, I do like seeing the other layer up here. So I'll go back to that lightning layer there and then paint that in just a little bit more, maybe a little on the outside edges here, just so we get our kind of our layering happening there, but something like that. And basically I'm just looking to kind of control where that viewer's attention goes as best I can. And I'm really happy with that. Yeah, not a lot to do. When you get these silhouettes exposed the way you want them, then yeah, there's really not a whole heck of a lot to do. So let me save this and close it, and we'll check the original. Go ahead and reset that original because there's a little bit of a difference here. You're going to notice in the original, this was probably kind of like the hottest spot there. So let's go to that raw file. We'll reset this, and yeah, look at that. I mean, they're kind of on par, but you can see, look in the final, where my attention goes so much more around this one because that's now the bright spot, and this one's dulled way down, whereas here, it's kind of getting pulled up there. And then we also just brought up more of the layers everywhere else, that kind of color pattern that's happening. So we go with this and we get to there. I definitely think an improvement. The little bit of a crop in is helpful as well. But I'm really happy with that final image. Hope you guys like that one. A little bit less space on the left side. helps it out. Exposure looks right on. I mean, gosh, I don't really think there's much of anything else to do this. I'll just give it a little pop of saturation and move on. Maybe just a little dodging and burning, tweaking. You can see it's getting a little bit bright right there. So let's throw a curve on that, kind of dull that down a little bit there. So I just basically paint that in. And then there's a little kind of hot spot right in the chin there. So we'll take that down, just trying to even out that tone. I think it'd be nice to punch up the bird's face a little bit there. Not punch the bird in the face, but punch it up. Photography humor, isn't it great? All right, there we go. So just a curve like that. Just paint a little bit in right up here. Make sure I don't get down into that area. And then maybe a little contrast along that would be nice. Those feathers right there, they're already pretty contrasty, but I kind of like what they show there. The way the light is kind of skimming across it. So maybe just kind of exaggerate and enhance that a little bit. And let's see what we think. Yeah, a little too much on that, I would say. So I'm just going to back off the opacity on that to about halfway. And then lastly, I'd love to keep the bottom looking almost as blue as the water there. It was wet sand, so it had a blue tone, but it was not water. It wasn't reflecting the same way. So another curves layer, go to the blue channel, bump up the mid-tones there. Off to the red channel we go, drop that a little bit, keep it in that cyan realm instead of making it like this purple blue. And then we'll paint that in. And you can see it's actually still too kind of purpley blue. So we'll move that cyan point down lower to kind of match. And then I'm just going to lower the opacity on the whole thing to leave just a little bit of difference there. So before, after, there we go. That's looking good. I don't think there's anything else. You know, the one thing I'm noticing though is like it's a bummer. Just these feather tips were catching the sun out there. So let's see if I can tone them down so they look like they're back in the shade with the rest of these. So let's try something like this. We're going to zoom in here on this soft one. You can see I really pulled down that highlight point there, and I'm just going to start painting this in real soft, low opacity. Just try to take the density down with it. I know there's a color difference there, so we'll deal with that next. But we're just trying to get it so it looks like it's part of that shaded feather. I went a little bit into the background there, so I'll switch to black and paint that back out. But already you can just see when I view it as a whole, that feather goes from there to there. It definitely looks less intense. So when you darken things a lot, sometimes it adds color. I'm going to go ahead and switch this to luminosity, which should hopefully, let's see, actually normal was dulling it down more, so I'm going to leave it on normal. I was going to say sometimes luminosity will dull the color down even more, but in this case, I don't think it needed it. So we'll just leave the blending mode on normal. Back to the background, I'm going to isolate this section with the marquee, and then, ooh, look at that. Little moire pattern showing in there. It's so small, it's not going to be a big issue, but that's what happens with these high resolution sensors. So let's just do color range here. Color range right on that. Shift click right there. Bump that fuzziness up. See if I can get all that happening a little too much. We want to get the background black. There we go. Something maybe like that. And then we'll just add in those weird colors in the middle there. Press OK on that. Should be pretty good to kind of just paint that in here. Yeah, look at that. It's kind of matching that spot, right? So we'll darken it down till it's about the same tone. I'm going to come back in and paint with black just to lighten that one swath up there a little bit. We got a little bit of an edge there. So let's deselect. I'm going to grab the blur tool and just kind of soften up that edge there. That seems to work decently. And then let's see if we can mess with the color. Let's just try a color layer. So I'm just going to put a blank layer, change the blending mode to color down here at the bottom, sample this, and then start painting over there. Hang on one second. So we'll just paint some of that color coming right across here, and you can see how it's matching up the tone there quite nicely. And honestly, it does not have to be perfect. I'm zoomed in so far here, and we got some different color coming in there. And that little bit of shadow is whatever. We got shadows coming all over the place there, but check this out. We go from there. Those feathers are really standing out to there. They've pretty much disappeared and blended into the background with all of the existing shadowed feathers there. So that, I think, is a good move on the edit there. It just kind of minimizes that. I don't think anybody's ever going to notice it, even though I know it's not perfect. I'm totally fine with that. Let's check the catch light there. It's a kind of tiny point, but we also have some of the kind of skyline showing in that bird's eye there. So there, nice big curve lift. We'll paint some of this across here. Just lighten this up a little bit so we'll get a little bit more life to that eye, a little bit more glow in the brown underneath there. I think is nice just to have that sun shooting right in there. And then look at that, right? So we go from there to there. Just that nice little bump in the eye. We'll go ahead and save that. Everything's looking really good there. Gotta love when you got some great light, huh? It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. All right, so real quick, I'll let this save. We will reset the original. In fact, I'll do that right now. Reset that. I mean, you can see I did not change much color on that. So there's my total before and after, staying pretty similar to what we had, but just a few minor improvements, a little bit more richness in the color here than the original there, and just toning down a couple of those brighter spots. Looking really good. I'm happy with that one. Let's move on to the next one. Same here, exposure lift, highlight lift, till the white's like, if I go there, see, that section starts getting a little too hot. So we just go right about there, lift that, warm it up a little bit. Let's really get that golden tone going there. A little bit of magenta, a little too much, backing off of that. And then straighten. Crop is good as is. I'm digging it. I am going to do a little bit of cleanup of just these little bumps and stuff like that in the sand there. Forgot to close that one. There we go. So I'm going to start with just my new blank layer. You just click plus down there. I have my action set to give me my fancy layer there all retouched or labeled as a retouch. So clone stamp tool, just going to use that and sample along the edges here. I'll switch back and forth between that and the spot healing brush and see how that works. Sometimes it just does a very nice job on these little things, but bigger, softer stuff like that usually doesn't do as well. So that's when I come in, I switch back to the clone stamp tool like I'm doing right now and just do it manually. But these little things like that, the spot healing brush are great for. So just press J to get back to the spot healing brush and then S to switch back to the clone stamp tool. And basically I just kind of have an idea of when they work, when they don't. It's never 100%, of course, but I try and just bounce back and forth between the ones, knowing which are going to work, or, you know, trying to guess which ones are going to work and when it's going to fail. And usually that means I try the spot healing brush first, hoping it's going to work. And then if it fails, I'll go with the clone stamp tool at that point. So you can see just that little bit of cleanup there, just kind of gets rid of that, some of that visual clutter that's in the foreground there. Now, I do want to try and even out the background here. So I'm going to add another curves layer here. We'll just kind of darken down the mids. And then big soft brush, light opacity, we'll just paint it right through the middle of this because you can see the edges were a little bit darker, you know? But what I didn't want to do is darken down the bird. So we'll come back in here, paint with black, and then just kind of lighten the bird back out of the scene so that all of these areas on the bird aren't getting darkened at all, because I do want this bird to be kind of this little shining beacon in the sea of the darker overall scene. So something like that. This area right here on the bird is a little light, so I'll paint some of that darkening effect in there. And there we go. So watch this on the before and after. It should be nice. So we get a nice darkening effect overall. I did notice as I toggled on and off there that I didn't quite paint this out great right here. So let's go in and fix that. Make sure to paint that back out. And there we go. Lastly, I do love the pattern that's going back in there. So I kind of want to maybe match up the exposure of that to that. So let's just throw another curve on there. Just brighten it up a little bit. Invert it. Big soft brush here. Just lightly paint in there, there, up top there. Maybe hit that spot a little bit. Just to kind of bring all those things around the same level. Now that I do that, I think they're more distracting, so we're going to trash that layer altogether. And then let's go the opposite. we'll actually darken the middle one to bring it down onto the level of the rest of them and try and keep everything slightly less distracting. I thought I really liked it back there. That's a little too much in some of those areas. I thought I really liked it back there, but it turns out it was just a slight bit too much. So there we go. I don't think there's anything else to do with the bird. The bird looks great there. The catch light, maybe I can exaggerate that. It looks like you can kind of see the horizon in there. Much smaller brush here. And we'll just kind of sweep that across here, painting with white. There we go. And then there's a little bit of glow down there. So that's it. I mean, in the grand scheme of the whole image, you're really not going to see it, but there we go. That's it. The main big difference on this one, I'm going to save this and close it, is the cleanup. I did just notice one more thing though. I don't love that cyan in the shadows there on kind of on the shadow side of the bird. So I'm just going to do a hue and saturation adjustment layer, go to the cyans, desaturate that a bit, go to the blues, desaturate that a bit, invert it, and then just kind of come in here and paint that in. And you can see it just kind of paints away some of that bluish cyan. It still leaves a little bit of it there. It's a little bit cooler tone, but there we go. I kind of like that better. So there, that should do the trick. I don't think there was a major change on this one, but let's let this save and close it. We'll go over to Lightroom, reset this one. Let's see, is that it? Yeah, I mean, gosh. Oh wait, maybe I did that on the, there's the reset version. Okay, so we end up going from this to that. Just basically punch up the image a little bit more warmth and detail overall and in that background, and just, whoops, sorry about that. And just making that bird go from there to there, stand out a little bit more, a little bit warmth overall, just a nice pleasing look. But the bird's still really standing out on that overall darker sand, which I really like. So that's it for this one. Let me get rid of my reset there, and there's my final image. I like that. They're so cute, these piping plovers. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I really like the dramatic light here. I do think we could go a little bit, I don't know. I like the cooler look actually. Let's go. I don't want to brighten everything. So let's see if I can get a subject select on this one and then just brighten that bird out of there. I can. So something like that right about there. We'll lift the shadows a little bit, drop the blacks. Now, don't think I missed that. Come on now, guys. All right, subtract with a brush. Come in here, no feather, flow 100%. So we'll get rid of all that 100% of the way. And it did some stuff over here as well. But it also is a little too bright there. I'd rather have more light on the face. So now, I'll stay on this brush, but then I'll feather it, drop the flow a bunch, and then just start subtly painting in there and bringing that back down darker. That's looking good. Just going to throw a radial right in here, keep it inside the bird's head there, lift up the exposure like that, drop the blacks, make sure none of that bled out into the background. It looks like it may have just a little bit, so just in case, intersect with subject select, should clean up that edge, but I think we're good. There we go. Basically just like the piping plover image I did before this. If you watch that one, you're going to be looking at the same thing here. Let's go ahead and take this into Photoshop and see what we can do here. A little bit of cleanup. We're going to make our retouch layer. Just hit it with the spot healing brush on just these lighter and darker spots. Try and kind of smooth them out. One little white speck right in the middle there. Back to the clone stamp tool for that bigger spot, and that one, tiny spot, back to the spot healing brush. So I just kind of bounce back and forth. That one kind of screwed up the in focus line there, so I'll just leave it. I do a lot of undoing, basically. So Command Z on the Mac, Control Z on Windows is kind of my favorite keyboard shortcut, or maybe not favorite, but certainly most often used. All right, there we go. Let's go darker across the top here. Let's really exaggerate this contrast here. So we're going to go mid-tone darkening, big soft brush, low opacity right across the top here. We'll just kind of try and tone that down a little bit. Put some of that in across here. We'll leave that middle band a little bit lighter, maybe some across this mid section there. And then we're going to do another curves adjustment layer. definitely brightening things up here on this bird. Smaller brush. We're going to start mainly on the head there. That's where I really want it, but I also want to kind of even out the lighting on the neck here. If you saw the culling video, you'll remember there was just this dark band there is more light angle than anything else. There's a little bit of that inherently in the bird's plumage, but it definitely was darker because of the light angle on this one, but I liked everything else about the position of the head on this one and the eyes and stuff like that. So there we go. That's looking pretty good. It looks like, I don't know if I did a subject select. I kind of forget on this original, but it looks a little bit lighter right in between the legs here. So we'll just go ahead and use that darken curves layer and just kind of bring that down to match the tone there. And then lastly, let's go back to this brighter one and just real small brush. We'll just kind of go along here and brighten up these little bits of sand and the wet reflecting on the bill there. I think that's going to do wonderfully. Watch to make this stand out. Look at that. There we go. Pops out nicely. And then we have this darkening that background. So between the two, we go from there to there, along with the cleanup in the sand. A nice dramatic image on this one. The bird really stands out. Nice dark, deep blue sand. And then we got our warm tones up top. Sometimes I might kind of even out that variation back there, but in this case, I kind of like it. It's just natural, and I've just been skewing more and more over the years of editing less, unless an image really calls for it. So there we go. There's our final. There's our before. If we reset this, we can see our total before. You can see the bird is pretty dark there. So look at that side by side. I mean, it basically is matching the concept, right? But we now have a little bit more brightness on the head there, and the bill really stands out and compared to everything else. All right, so there's that final image of this Dunlin, and on to the next one we go. Another kind of silhouette shot here with a little rim light on those goofy feathers on this semi-palm plover that's getting nailed by the wind. Little exposure lift, warm it up. I'm going to really lean into that golden light. Let's go with just showing the separation in white to black there. So something like that. I think we're good to go. I'm happy with the golden tone in Lightroom, so right into Photoshop we go with this. First things first, make that new blank layer. I usually label it retouch. And then we're just going to use the clone stamp tool, just clean up some of these brighter spots that are just visually distracting to me. Spot removal tool, just there for that and that one. It does really good at those. And then this is the biggest issue when I viewed the whole image, was this big dark spot on the edge. I could have cropped it out, but I really just loved the feeling of space in this one and the balance of it. So I wanted to leave it there. This is mildly distracting back here, so I'm just going to kind of soften that out and then bring some from this side. We got some of these bright spots here to just kind of even out a little bit and just kind of blend in. And it's basically, they're just little tiny things on the beach getting lit up with that backlit sun, just like this bird's feathers, which is exactly why I shot it like this, because I love that glow. So there we go. Watch this cleanup. See, it just takes away some of that visual clutter, just smooths it out, but completely staying within the realm of, you know, what this scene looked like to begin with. I don't feel like I've done any major altering or anything like that. And it's keeping within the spirit of the original image. All right, so I like that fun bokeh back there. Everything else is looking pretty good on this. The main thing I want to do is just enhance the glow and actually kind of add it on the back there. The bird was a little bit to the left. I would have liked it more to the right when I got it, but then when it got into the right, the sun was so bright on that sand, the wet sand, it was just really shining out. So here we go. We're going to do a big exposure lift. Make sure I don't completely overexpose the whites, and we'll bring that back down. I'm going to start on these areas that are already there with a nice small brush. Yes, they're going to get overexposed, but I'll fix that in a little bit. That'll be like the last step I do. And basically, I'm just going to outline this. I'm going to go a little bit smaller with the brush when it gets, whoops, bad painting there. A little bit smaller with the brush when it gets into this area down there. It went a little too far, so I'll paint with some black. Some feathers sticking out there. And then, yeah, we're just going to kind of complete it where it kind of wasn't down there. Back here, I'm going to come in with a different brush. Right now I'm using a non-pressure sensitive brush, so it's giving me 100% of this effect. And I don't really need it back there. There's a good glow going on back here already in some areas, but anywhere that either there isn't a glow or I want to like really enhance it, I'm going to hit it with this brush. But these areas, that was really bad. These areas like in here that don't need near the amount of enhancement because there's already a glow happening there, I'm just going to go ahead and use a different brush that has pressure sensitivity to it. So here we go. You can see I'm completing the glow around the back here, just basically adding that rim light. That's why I pushed up that curve so far, is because I wanted to kind of complete that rim light and just make it kind of pop a little bit more all along these back edges, especially along the top of the head here. We'll complete it right up there. And keep in mind, I am zoomed in past 100% right now. I believe, yeah, I'm at like 200% zoom. So it's a little bit too far. I'm not going to really see all this detail in the final image, especially when I share it on like Instagram or something like that. I'm not going to see any of this fine detail that I'm worried about right here. But I do want to try and keep it looking nice and clean. Whoa, bad paint there. While I am working this edge, I'm just going to really try and keep it nice and clean here. And we'll complete that right around the tip of the bill. There we go. That's looking good. Now I'm going to go in with that soft brush with some opacity and paint this in. We're going to actually lighten the legs a little bit. We'll get that glow enhancing in there. Yes, I just missed that and went into the background, but no worries. I'll go back and paint that out in a second because I knew just like that I was going to do it again. I'll get a harder edge brush, paint with black, make sure I just clean up those edges, go right along those nice sharp edges there so I don't have any sort of haloing. Back to my soft pressure sensitive brush, painting with white again, and then just lightly painting in these areas to get that glow sort of enhanced and make it stand out more. And this is somewhat tedious work, but it's going to really look nice in the end. See, I hit all these like individual feather strands and just make them, you know what, I did a really bad job on that. I needed a smaller brush and just kind of go in. There we go. Follow those individual feather strands. It's a little too sharp where I painted in, but I'll show you a trick in a second. Let's go just a little bit bigger on these with the brush. Oops. And we'll paint that in. All right, this was too sharp up there. Excuse me. So we'll grab the blur tool and then just softly paint over that. It blends it right back in the way it should be. A little bit of this can take some of this lightening. And these are all pretty good out here. I'll just lighten that just a little bit. That should be good. All right, so now I still have this brush with opacity, so I'm going to lightly just kind of remove some of this in these areas, especially up here where they were getting a little too bright. Mainly because it was already there, you know? And now I'm just going to lessen that rim light along the back there a little bit. And there we go. So watch this. Before, after. You guys see how subtle that is? Before, after. It's a little bit much around the bill there, so I'll just subtle that. And let's go back into 100%. Before, after. There we go. That's all I feel like I really needed to do this. So it's just clean up and pop that rim light, make that stand out a little bit more. Let's do a little bit more burn across the bottom there. I think that will look nice. Invert that. Big soft brush. Just swipe that right across the bottom there. Remove it off of the really dark spot so that doesn't get much darker. And there we go. Let's go ahead and close and save that. I like the amount of white that's showing on there, although I got to say I don't like it up there over the head. It's kind of weird up there, I think. So maybe let's paint in just a little bit of that darkening up here, just so we have like the main bold white stripe showing. And there we go. So we'll close and save that. Let's go back to the original here and reset that. See what we're looking like. Yeah, so we're a little cool on the white balance. The whites, that glow wasn't quite popping as much to begin with. And as soon as this finishes saving, we'll go ahead and compare the original right out of camera with our final image. Definitely some improvement there. Obviously white balance improvement, but check that out. A nice finished backlit image. This one we're going to be leaning in entirely into the golden, wouldn't you say? Not as much interest up top there. Don't need all that bokeh. A little bit of space for the tail there. Lift up exposure, shadow lift, drop blacks, really go golden. Nice golden color, a little bit more magenta. Linear gradient off of this side, drop the exposure just a little. Let's soften that transition out. So we'll expand these two so we can drop the highlights more. Radial right in here, drop those highlights even more. Now we have that toned down, and I think we're good to go on this. Crazy sparkling image. This thing definitely needs some help to really make the bird stand out. So I think we did a great edit so far here in Lightroom to get it to a good spot. So into Photoshop we go. First things first, I want to take care of this incredibly bright hot spot there. So just a retouch layer. I'm going to grab just a regular paintbrush, sample this nice bright color, and then we'll paint that in just to tone that down. And in fact, I'll sample the color right next to it and just match that up. Any of these other areas that are really overexposed, I think that was the one that just had that funky color look. Okay. Next up, I'm going to start some dodging and burning here. So we're going to burn down this bottom right-hand side. Let's invert that. Paint with some white there. A little bit right along there. Just kind of try and tone this down somewhat. Another curves adjustment layer. Now we're going to go the opposite way. We're going to really punch things up, but then maintain our contrast. Let's invert that. Now we got to decide where we want that to happen. Mainly up here is where I want it, and just a little bit through kind of the reflection area, not so much on the left side there, but I'm basically trying to lighten everything around that outline of the bird. See that? But leave that bird nice and black. So it just makes that shape, that silhouette kind of pop out a little bit more. It does, however, make some of these bokeh balls just like a little bit too light. So I'll just go back in with a tiny brush and bring them back down into a little bit more acceptable tone for myself. And I thought this was going to take a little bit more work, but that kind of did it. That particular curve right there, doing that and then kind of anchoring the blacks a little bit, I think worked really well. And just painting it in on that left side was really nice. So we go from there to there. So see how, I want you to watch the overall image here and notice this. I'm going to turn off everything. So there's total before and the after. Before. Notice how this is just the brightest, most dominant area of the photo. It's really pulling attention. And then when I do this, it kind of subdues. It's still a very dominant part of the image. I'm not trying to say it's not, but it definitely shifts my attention sort of, I would say not right to the bird, but evenly throughout. Everything kind of goes from that bottom right corner to just, oh, that seems like consistent across the whole image. And that's what I'm looking for, because the silhouette on its own at that point should make it stand out. I thought I was gonna have to do a lot more, but I'm happy with that. So save it and close it. Done. Nice, easy edit. Nothing wrong with doing less to an image. I'm always happy when I can do that. I will go ahead and reset the original raw file on this one. Oops. Let's take a look at that. Reset it. Yeah, big difference there. So check that out. So I exposed this bird really dark. White balance was a little wonky, but I really had to in order to get the detail in these bokeh highlights there, because if I overexposed them and they were not going to come back, they were all going to look weird and funky. And you can see I had no problem lifting up the shadows and getting that separation there. So we go from that to that. There's our final image. Something definitely a bit different. And it was probably really neat. I hope you watched the shoot video on this. I find it really neat and fascinating to see how small the window is as that bird is walking across this stuff to get just this sweet spot where I can expose everything the way I want it and edit it out. Because as soon as he goes to the right a little bit more, everything gets a little too insane bright. And then if he's too far to the left, I'm not really seeing that bokeh, that sparkle, because the sun isn't at the right angle. So it's a very particular shot. The exposure's got to be just right. And I think it does make some really compelling, interesting shots. There's a lot going on here. So this shot to me is about as much as like the subject is equally almost the bird and the sparkling bokeh everywhere. But I'm okay with that sometimes. All right, on to the next one. Straighten it out. I don't love this mess back there, but there's no easy way of getting rid of that here in Lightroom. So lift exposure, warmer, slight bit of magenta to get rid of the green tint, shadow lift, drop the blacks. I think I went too far with the magenta. I'll back off that just a little bit. And now this one I think can use a nice just gradient at the bottom. Just kind of darkening that. Maybe we'll move it down a little bit. Just trying to even out that bottom there. And yeah, I think that's looking good. Pretty cool how the color of the inside of the bill like that basically matches the worm. I just noticed that. Anyway, nice basic edit here in Lightroom. Over into Photoshop we go. Going to do a little bit of cleanup. I'm really unsure about this one. I do think it's a distraction, that big clump of stuff there. But it also feels like it's on the verge of, that's a big removal, you know. It's just part of the scene and the habitat. I feel like these little things I'm taking out now are just so insignificant that they don't really make it part of the beach scene, you know, whether they're there or not. And so I'm kind of fine removing them because I feel like they just give a more visually pleasing, smooth, clean image, which I like. But that other piece is just a big removal. And that's something that I kind of toy with all the time when I'm doing this sort of stuff is what is my line? Where is my barometer take me with editing and removal of stuff? And also, you know, if I do something really significant, does it change the original intent of the photo or the original spirit of the photo? And if so, then I probably should just disclose it. So anyway, this is one of those things. And I feel like, again, like these background things are just, they're so kind of insignificant and just easy enough to kind of just swipe away. And it's not even a technical thing. Watch, because I'll put another layer on here and just show you, you know, if I was going to clone this thing out, what I would do here, just using the clone stamp tool. Just going to really kind of quickly kind of get rid of it. We'll take this slope right down. I know I'm making one hell of a pattern right now, but I'll come back in and clean that up in a moment. This is usually how I go about doing this sort of thing, though, is I start out just getting rid of the object, then I come back in and clean up and deal with pattern creation and stuff like that. Because when you don't have much to take from, inevitably, I feel like you are going to generate some patterns. And so then I start trying to smooth out those patterns using different sampling locations, different amounts of opacity to kind of paint through those areas. But what I wanted out of that is I wanted to sort of maintain this in focus, sort of sloping downhill kind of thing here that I think is going to tie into the existing beach over here that you see. And so let's take this, oops, bad clone angle there. Actually going to need to see my sample to line it up there. So that's a little bit better. And we'll take some of that in right there, sample some of this back out the other way. And I am zoomed in way too far here. And so you won't notice any of that, or much of that, I guess I should say, because I'm still seeing a little bit of it when I zoom out. And so now I'm just kind of smoothing it out. So you can see it didn't really take that long. There's still a little bit of patterning going on in there. I'll try and just kind of mitigate that some, but there we go. A little bit weird right there. Maybe some of that needs to kind of carry that way, and there, something like that. So I think overall that's looking fine. So watch, just kind of pop that thing out of there. Not a big change, right? But honestly, does it really clean it up that much? You know, like, I mean, it does, but it's a big change. So I'm actually going to end up leaving that one. So back to my regular retouch layer. I will get rid of that just a little bit and then just kind of smooth this out a little right there. I got this dock sort of thing that made those wild colors in the background. The few things I want to do here, curves adjustment, just darken. I do want to darken that back. Did not mean to do that. I do want to darken that back just a little bit more, and then maybe even across the bottom here, And then actually I can use that to kind of burn that bird darker. We're going to do another curves adjustment layer, punch it up the other way, maintain the contrast. This is all going to get painted in on the subject here. So in on the bird, in and around the head, you can see what it's really doing for these feathers, right? Just kind of give me a little bit more detail and contrast on the bird itself. I'll definitely hit up this worm with that. There we go. Now the worm's popping. All right. That's about all I wanted to do there. So we do that. So we go from there to there. Whoa, sorry about that. Let's look at that before and after again. Before, after. Subtle changes, a little bit of dodging and burning. I think I went too much on the face here, so I'm just going to back off of that a little bit. I actually like it more on the body. It feels like it makes more sense down here because the light's bouncing up. The head was just looking in the before and after just like a bit oddly light. Yeah, there we go. I'm happy with that. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that junk there. It's part of the scene. It's part of the shot. I think everybody can overlook it enough and really look at the worm pull there. And that's it for that shot. It was a fun thing. Really cool to see him do that after he got chased off from the gull. Came back, got another worm, pulled it. Or maybe it was the rest of that worm. I don't know. But let's go ahead and take a look at that original. So they're straight out of camera, or crooked out of camera as it were. And there we go. Definitely a big difference. Warmer tones overall. Looks clean. It's like this whole section of the beach now. See how much cleaner it is by just getting rid of all that junk. And then the detail that we see on the bird certainly improved. So there's that final image. That's my first really good worm pull with a Godwit too, so I'm happy with it. Oh, this one's too funny. Let's level it up. Crop like that. Man, I don't think it needs anything else. I love that the brightest white is right there. So the exposure is like right on. Any more, watch, and like, boom, see it's like starting to overexpose. So if I shot it any lighter, that would have overexposed. So I think I nailed the exposure. Plus everything's so dark, and I love that pattern that's going on back there. That I will say that 2.8 lens does some nice magic in the background there. This thing is looking really good. I'm just going to do a little bit of dodging and burning and a tiny bit of cleanup. So get that blank layer down here. A little bit of cleanup on these just couple of oddball white spots there. Just because they're like the only other light thing in the image. And then some minor burning across the top. We'll do it like that. Big soft brush, just kind of paint that in. There, tone down this just a little bit across that bottom there, and gosh, I think we're done here, crew. Yeah, that's about it. Maybe see if I can get a little bit more in that catch light. Whoa, wrong one. Curves, there we go. Lighten that up a good bit so you can see how that horizon line was starting to show in there. So when I paint this across, there we go. A little bit more life to the eye. Hit that eye ring just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, that kind of pops that eye up. Look, before, after. It's subtle, but it's nice. And then just the ripply mess of feathers and that strong light coming in. I absolutely love it. This is one of those cases where that strong dramatic light really makes it. Yeah, I think, yeah, I keep just trying to find something and debate like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? But in the end, I keep coming back to, yeah, I think this thing is really good. Overall, I got a little bit of more brightness to the bird by darkening everything else. So I didn't have to lighten the bird, but it's going to give the appearance of making that bird stand out a little bit more. So watch, we go before, after. See that? So again, not changing the brightness of the bird, but darkening everything else subtly to make that bird really pop out. What a fun image. Nice, easy edit. I got lucky. Not lucky. I did a good job of getting the proper exposure out of camera. There you go. You can see it's right there. That's straight out of camera. We just did a little straightening there. Really no adjusting. Actually, yeah, just like nothing to do to that. And then just some minor dodging and burning to get there. Fun image. It's a little too centered. So I'll just try and, that giving the tail or the edge of the bird space really depends on how tight everything else is. When it's a really tight frame like this, I feel like you can push a little bit closer to the edge there and get away with it. In any case, let's lighten it up a little. Something like that. Little tiny bit of warmth, little tiny bit of magenta. That color looks really good. I do like the drama that's in the light there. I'm just going to lift the shadows to soften it just a touch. All right, nearing the end. We just got 2 images left here. If you're watching all these, I give you a lot of credit. Thanks for sticking with me through all these. Here's another dramatic side-lit image. This time we got this Godwit. I mean, again, I just am really struggling to find anything else to do with these in Photoshop. These images are looking really good after the minor tweaks in Lightroom. I'm going to make a new blank layer here, just a minor sample, and just clone out. There's just like this light-ish edge right up there. Just going to kind of clone that out. I could have done it with a curves burn layer, but didn't really feel like I need to. I love the color everywhere. Yeah, I'm done. I really don't need to do anything else. I can maybe, let's lighten up the bill just because, right? We'll lighten it a little bit, and then we'll go in here and add a little bit of red to it. So we'll invert it, paint it in right down the bill here. Just kind of make that pop and be a little bit more vivid pink there, but tons of detail on this. Oh, you know what? Wow, that was an extreme zoom, huh? Let's see if we can make this water drop that's forming on the end of the bill there just stand out a little bit more. So big brighten on the curve. We're going to paint it in just right there. Oh man, this gives me such a great idea for a shot. If I could ever get close enough to a shorebird with a drop like this, I can see the horizon like flipped upside down in there. That would be super cool, wouldn't it? All right, watch this. Before, after. See how it just makes that drop just show a little bit more there? And there we go. We're done. Let's go ahead and save and close that. I'll reset the original here in Lightroom. There you go. Not much of a change, just a little bit brighter, a little bit more pop of contrast. Gets you there. Then let's wait for that image to show up from Photoshop. There it is. And then we go there. So from that to that. I mean, just that minor change there. And then we pop that little water drop. We got a nice shot with that dramatic side light onto the last image. So to start out with, the settings were copied from the previous image I edited when I went through the entire set. If you didn't watch the entire color correction and final color, you missed that. But basically it was just some general overall settings, and then I'll tweak them from here as you're about to see. And I think I went just a little too green for this shot. I'm gonna rotate it straight, move it, compose it this way. And this one's a little too light for that image. I do wanna keep things a little bit darker, more dramatic. And let's just throw a radial right around this bird's head. And then we've got that. And I think we're going to be seeing more of the same here. Not a lot to do with this. I got a nice good exposure. I underexposed a bit in camera in the first place, just punched it up a little bit in post. I don't have anything to clone. So let's do a curves adjustment layer. Let's go a little bit more dramatic with this one. So we'll really take down that background and paint that in certain places here. So we'll just come across this side like this, tone that down, let that top go nice and deep and rich. A little bit right in the middle there, kind of across here, nice and dark there. Really keep it rich. Now let's go the other way. We'll add another curves adjustment layer, pop things up a little bit there, invert that. We'll paint some of that in on the face, around the head, let some of this plumage stand out a little bit more. I don't want to hit that side because I don't want it to get it really bright. We can do some of the bill here like that. And then we'll also go in and let's clean up a little bit of that blue tone that's showing on the shadow side there. It's getting really extreme there. So we'll hue and saturation adjustment layer, go to the blues, desaturate them, invert it, just subtly come in and paint that in. I don't want to get rid of it entirely because shadows are cooler, but they're not that blue in reality when we see them, even though in this case it is reflecting some water as well. So I think something like that is going to do it. Let me zoom out. Let's take a look before, after. Yeah, look at that. It really just kind of zeroes our eye in. One thing I noticed though, on my dodging here, I don't really like the dodge down here because it's kind of pulling my attention down to this section of the bird. And I want to keep it up there. So now, before, after, that's better. let's close that, save it. We'll take a look at the complete original before in Lightroom here. Just go ahead and reset that. It's going to be a little bit darker. And I didn't do great with the composition on this one either. So had to fix that in post. But there we go, from that to that. Much improved. There's my final image. So let's take a look at the entire set of images here. We'll just kind of filter this out. Look at the Photoshop documents. And there we go. That's our set of images from one morning out on the beach with some really cool dramatic light. A lot of variety. I'm happy with that. Everything from these pastel dusk tones to the cool silhouettes that happened at sunrise. Then some nice dramatic side light. Back to some interesting backlight with some rim light there. A little bit more rim light silhouette there. Nice rim light on that one for the behavior, which was great. And then more dramatic side light to round out this set of portraits of 3 different species. So we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Seven different species. Just like that, huh? Nice shoot. I really had a fun time. I hope you guys enjoyed this entire process and learned something along the way. I hope you learned a ton along the way. Thanks so much, everybody.